Welcome back. Hello. We're gonna play some reggae. Pardon me if this is a little loud. I tried it. It seemed okay. It also says no copyright. I don't know if that's true. There's definitely reason to be suspicious of that being long term, not having any outcomes, having this in my video. Okay. So, episode 400 also, so I was thinking a lot of things. It's been days. I could have recorded a couple days ago, and I had some things that were really flowing, but didn't quite work out. And then last night, same circumstances. Really, 2 nights I wanted to record, I didn't, and it's still kind of like, do I do this yet? But then I'm like, I'm losing things that it's hard to like get them back once a thought happens and some connection is there potentially. It can just like never be seen again. So I was thinking I would try to document some stuff, and I'm looking into, if you haven't seen my research, viewer discretion is advised. I essentially look at everything through an interpretation that the Earth expanded and does not function under plate tectonics. So that's like a first hurdle amongst many hurdles, where the more you like accept mainstream as at least like the most likely thing, or like don't oppose it enough where you would doubt some alternatives being proposed, because how like that must come through the right avenues. Yeah, so just a heads up, that's where we're at. I'm proposing a lot of things that are not like even like on the radar of modern science. Okay. So, although like through the lens of details acquired therefrom, it's not like I'm like psh. I just disagree with the interpretation, but still look at and attempt to piece together the information into what I believe is the more likely reality of the situation, which is starting from an Earth expansion, but then it really gets out there, but it is what it is. Like, I grew up atheist, so for me to say that there was a flood that was part and parcel to the Earth expansion process, and that it all happened in what would essentially be like thousands of years, not millions of years, even though geologically the record that it encompasses is from 541 million to basically the Holocene, so like thousands of years ago. And it was caused by the usage of Brahmastras, is my interpretation, in Hindu scripture. So like from actual ancient civilization wars, where the usage of weaponry that was like that time's most potent weapon could cause an inflow of energy into the earth that then led to an upwelling of material from within that then resurfaced the earth by a process that is written. So this is like always in flux, but pretty rigid too in a lot of ways. In terms of like, this is where the energy was emitted from, at least in the last in the times of Dwarka. I'm not completely certain. I've essentially interpreted that 541 to the Holocene was what happened because of the attack on ancient Dwarka, which I randomly, like, just perusing topics, came in to be intrigued one time in this place called Dwarka, and I found it really interesting that there were actual, like, things off the coast of India, but they didn't match description of this Dwarka. And I generally believe that if something is like true, then it's gotta be true. So like, if Dwarka existed based on this text, then the description of the city being composed of gold, crystal, gems, and silver must also be a criteria. So what it was found just does not adhere to that criteria, but it's actually down off the tip of the Zoroastrian Peninsula over here. But I just looked around, and one day I'm like, what about this? Like, Dwarka means gateway, or gateway to heaven, or other varieties I've heard. But gateway, it also is at a curious depth that's within the range of sea level rise since the last ice age kind of concept, where maybe it was like exposed and a city was there, and it has other details. But this led me to look around, and I'm like, the description says a vortex weapon was used, and that, well, a fierce vortex arose. So whatever it is, it caused a vortex. So a vortex weapon is kind of how I see it. The fierce vortex arose, blanketing the region with billowing dust, is what the text says. So I was kind of just was like, this is weirdly a fierce vortex. And I started looking around the Saurashtra Peninsula in Gujarat, India, because it's very odd, anomalous features are here with the what I came to interpret as like a track where this vortex ended up going over here and then discharging in some way to interact with Gurnar. So then I started to like research Gurnar, and with regard to this vortex, initially I thought it went in here, then I realized I think it went in here, and this over here has all these like cavity looking things that actually extend down to right here in this area, which I talked about in like the last few episodes, is literally like the container of this thing above. This right here has a boundary over here, this thing, and up here that is contained over here to the little protrusion on the right, and then up to here. So it's like within this region, was interacting with this storm, this vortex, and causing this upwelling of material from the mantle that then physically flowed out below the crust from this like energetic high pressure point where currents are flowing outward, which then led to the magnetic anomaly map, which actually traces where these currents were especially flowing by being either a high intensity or low intensity anomaly where high currents are flowing, which is blue. So the more blue, the more currents were flowing through that actual like low density region because currents flowing through it. Whereas where it's high intensity magnetic anomalies, currents compacted material that then produced an actual structure. So the whole Earth, like over here, there's very visible just like current paths and even a bend. This bend happens when the current flows down towards the pressure of that location and just bounces off over this way, pretty much. And it also goes off this way and around over here. So there's all sorts of evidences that across time have accumulated to the point where I realized these are current induced. And somewhere along the line I noticed ammonite structures to be current induced and not actually the fossilized remains of a living creature's seashell, but structures caused during the flood by these current flows that are basically larger scale fractal representations of like an iterative, very fundamental type of system. What exactly it is, like maybe an atom, like exactly as I've kind of, like for example over here, if we look at this one, like it has like, I've also got a bunch of like the periodic table of currents research where I pretty much tried to describe atoms as being the construction of a current flow into a chamber that then arranges by pressure neutrons, which are basically massive blocks to the pressure of this system that's forming, but then protons, which are essentially locations where current occupies. So here there's a lot of current because it's blue. Here there's current because it's blue. But here there's this dense, high intensity, meaning a mound is there physically. So like a mass, neutron. So it goes neutron, proton, proton, neutron, neutron, proton, proton, neutron. Like that, it has that structure is very atomic. I don't, and certainly other details that probably are in the data, but the point is, over here, Australia, which was really like in this location, like the base of this structure down here that goes around, that mind you looks kind of like one of those handbag structures that's in a lot of like ancient civilization related stuff. But the ammonite structure that's in there. Also see my Shallogram playlist for lots of evidence for why ammonites are current induced based on shallograms and other things related. Did that already play it through? Oh. It's like it's not doing anything. Okay. So the reason that's important though is because to the right of this is this structure here, which looks like a snow angel having like a figure 8 magnetic field in the center with like a nucleus. And then like a flame looking structure down here underneath it. And then above it, this like focused beam looking structure, because these are currents. Like, because currents are inducing this, this is currents interacting in opposition, running into each other, leading to really exceptional things. Like the currents were focused underneath this, which then led to an actual like contained space that currents were going into, but there was actually a shell to it underneath the crust. But over time, pressures got in from a certain location and literally removed material from it to turn it into an ammonite, and probably a lot more than that, but in terms of the detail. But then in the process, it emitted particles, one of which moved over here, like large scale particles, to the point where it was like a baby planet, basically. Like very small scale compared to a planet, but it was relatively spherical. It emitted this spherical particle. This is the interpretation I've come to, and what I'm really trying to build into, because in terms of what this video is about, is going to be about these details, like in terms of what I've found more recently, and see my last couple videos. I think the last two have been kind of building into this, and then here we are. But so this particle comes out over here, passing this place where current is flowing, and it essentially runs into another place where current is flowing, like over here. So there's current flowing this way that's then flowing into, before the earth expanded, this way. So it's flowing across here though, to here. And then this structure forms there, or formed there. Just trying to think about its relationship. So there's Ontong Java Plateau and over here. So this is another piece of the puzzle, if you will. Ontong Java Plateau was once the same unit as Manihiki Plateau over here. This and this were together with Hikurangi Plateau down here. All three were one singular source that broke into pieces, basically. So, because the Earth expanded, this thing generally formed like in another location here. We can kind of see the blockiness around this, and then over this shape. So I've been kind of... Sorry if that was a little too vague of it. Because the Earth expanded. What are you talking to? I'm barely accepting listening to you. So many details. But this was generally forming along the boundary, I believe, although I've been thinking about things a lot, I'm not sure what I've talked about in terms of the last few videos. If I want to go into this yet either. It's kind of, hopefully when I get back to it, I can go into this. So I see some structures here that are very interesting, like relatively ring-like here, across here. And then another one this way that maybe goes out there too. And maybe also goes down there. Generally, maybe even spiral, more spiral-like. And then around this one, larger one. And then up here, where this one goes kind of in across these. So this boundary, and then presumably maybe it was back up that way. And then there's one in the magnetic anomaly map under Australia. So I was thinking maybe it's doing some kind of like gear rotation when the Earth is expanding, because this is a focal point. This system, Australia, is known to have tilted, I believe, after 70 million. So maybe the Ontong Java Plateau formed underneath this like incubating system of Australia, but it like shifted as pressures of the Earth's expansion process of these currents. Like these currents are flowing out in all directions so intensely that they then are pinching at another point on the Earth where they're colliding with so much intensity that they physically form an ammonite structure at that location. But that like underneath the crust though, mind you, so that it's not even like on top of the crust, because there's also on top of the crust currents. So this is a underneath the crust current that's flowing, I think. Sometimes I wonder if it's actually been on the top all along. So crazy though, like the structure is invisible. Point is, this thing is imprinting like its location as it's etched out. Its materials are etched out and deposited in some kind of like ring-like structure around it, basically, is what I was thinking. Like maybe some nucleus section that's, I mean, this is more ammonite-like, so maybe like we're looking here, the way this spiral goes around and then back and around in there. So maybe, is what I was thinking, Australia broke off from this position initially, moved over here, where then it left a structure, and then moved over here, where it formed the Ontong Java Nui Oceanic Plateau, but then it moved off of it and kind of like, when it formed this, it was actually along the boundary of Australia, almost forming like another tab, like a tab, a tab, a tab, a tab, a tab, like a pixelated video game kind of thing, where it's trying to form like an actual chunk of landmass that I probably was very much related to Zealandia, so maybe even trying to form this whole stretch, but then it failed, Probably because the sphere tore it apart. The crazy thing is this sphere did so many things that I'm going to talk about in this video. So, where to begin? Maybe here. Let's go here. No, fuck. Trying to like do this in enough detail. If someone's just watching, I don't skip too many of the most important things because I know it's very like crash course, something that sounds ridiculous, so it's hard to like fathom the basis without me at least like providing some curious details. But essentially, let's go to Hawaii real quick. Hawaii, which in its present position is where this is, this, and this one. And then I took this one, these seamounts, kind of coupled them. The whole actual structure of them, not including the slides, because essentially it was a sphere. So if it was a sphere that broke apart, then it would probably have landslides afterwards that are kind of extending its boundary to almost like like a ship landing and putting out it's like some kind of brace. I don't know. That didn't make sense. Like a UFO. Ship braces. Okay. So I cut off those segments, and then I took the 3 segments, rather than doing all of the islands. Like, I didn't limit it to just the boundary of the sea level. I took the entire structure. Said all these islands are really part of one structure that has this shape that's kind of like a W with like the arms out, which I feel like is something iterative, like the way this is. And then this location is attached to here, to Kohala still, but if we just move the big island of Hawaii over here, 3 attaches to 3, let's say. The distance, essentially the distance along both boundaries is very similar, as well as the distance up top along both boundaries. Like, basically, if you were to roll this over, 8 would attach to 8. 9 would attach to 9, but then 10 would attach to 10 over here, and 11 would attach to 11 over here, 12 to 12, 6 to 6, 5 to 5, but then 4 to 4, 3 to 3, 2 to 2, so it's actually a sphere where the yellow location is where they were all once together, opposite basically to some general center point of this W thing that maybe I just put there for convenience, but really it wasn't center of this thing. But some 2 points, one of which was like the break point, and the other was like the rigid, remained firm side while the poles blew off. So this thing was like the North Pole and some attaching conduit type thing going on that then attached to this like belt thing, and then on the base was like the storage of the hot magma that ended up being stored within the larger chunk of the big island. And then it was a sphere though that had a larger a larger overall structure where it broke apart, and basically the inner surface of the sphere was the Hawaiian Islands that are now exposed today. The surface was the inner surface of this sphere, which then the outer surface broke apart as it rolled and deposited the material back here along the Emperor Seamount chain. And then it ran into resistance importantly at where it bends. And it bends importantly more than once. It really has a second bend over here. Like it goes at this angle, and then it goes over more at an angle that's not like in line with it. In terms of this difference here, where these are all relatively in the same line. So it has a first bend and a smaller second bend, and then goes over here. And it's rolling along, depositing material, running into resistance for reasons we'll get into, and bending this way to then break apart its inner sphere to splay out as the Hawaiian Islands. I know it sounds ridiculous, but the evidence is really quite strong. So, one of the details is, I believe, Benham Rise, which has the largest caldera on Earth. Apolaki caldera, which I came across in a YouTube video by Diamond Dave Boom. I feel like, well, I don't know what to say sometimes. It's good video, but about this caldera and Gackle Ridge. So this caldera is actually pretty much where Benham Rise is, which is what this is in front of the Philippines here. And within it, it has the largest caldera on Earth structure, and then what seems to be a smaller circular thing. So I was thinking maybe it actually went here, and its interaction as it moved along here away from it to like out this way. Like there's the Mariana Trench, which has this like shadow of itself, and it reaches back and back and back and then into this nook. Whoa. Just thinking some random things. Okay. But it seems related to the process that we're gonna get into. So this one's Like, I even was thinking maybe here was a resting spot. Okay, so maybe I'll go over here. So it's my interpretation that maybe, let's watch some animations real quick. That Australia was once generally connected like this to South America and to North America, whereas Solomon Islands and Papua New Guinea were folded in, which is before that Ontong Java Ontong Java Plateau occupied the space in front of Solomon Islands. So there was this like merge point or pressure point, maybe just a pressure point where currents were especially at that was then interacting. And then there was this. Never mind Borneo up there, but where Papua New Guinea shows signs of some kind of like bond breakage between the continents, where they were energetically connected, and then there's similarities across between California and Sulawesi and North Maluku, with a basin with the Una Island up in the top here, with the, or maybe that was, this is something else. Oh, I think that's Una Island, but then it has Sutter Buttes at the center of that, so there's like a parallel basin, actual structure lines that line up, suggestive of some kind of cross the ocean, maybe not even exactly adjacent like this, maybe energetically adjacent. I don't know. It's hard to say sometimes exactly what things were like in these positions. Like if this was happening, would it have to be here, or could it be like pretty far away, but kind of current flows interacting in the space between that are still producing like relationships at a distance? I don't know, but these bond type things seem kind of like they would probably be more physically present when it happened there, to at least create some type of long-term damage that allowed upwelling from it, that then just left behind its faulty trace lines, even though it was formed much later than the bond breaking in terms of the ocean crust around it. Then there is Western Australia, where Sulawesi and North Maluku were folded in, with this segment of Papua New Guinea folded in. Philippines were attached over here. Borneo was attached here. Borneo up there, so Philippines were attached to that. So that's the framework of what we're kind of looking at to see what we can gather. Let's see. Talked about that a couple episodes ago. There's also this image, which maybe I can... where these were together, and then there's a current flow going this way into Borneo and Indonesia. So once I realized, wait a minute, maybe I can just start like aligning these borders more. I ended up doing this in the last video. ish last, I think the last video, where then I started from the boundary here and just started taking little bits of the boundary. So there's Papua New Guinea, there's Baja California, there's California, there's Sulawesi, North Maluku, Philippines, and then I put Borneo up here. And as I kept doing this, I was like running into some problems in terms of like what exactly is going on. So I tried again, and this time maybe before I go there, maybe where is it? Also, I have a bunch of pretty stoked postings because I was pretty excited. Here's the... Oh, I guess I didn't go through these. I'll go through that in a minute, I guess. This one is what I'm looking for. This. So basically, what I'm interpreting is, from what I understand, Alaska and Russia, those regions, were once in the general North Pole area. How exactly they were arranged is probably debated and not so like certain, but generally they were up there. And what I've interpreted is that this boundary and this boundary were adjacent to one another, folded in together, where this boundary was one side of this ridge, and then the other side of the ridge was this boundary. And that this whole chunk was up here, pretty much, past the ridge on this side, where this structure, at least everything that doesn't include accreted terrains, like the continental structure, seems to be like maybe this way and like around here to this part, and then this one more like this way, across maybe there with some, maybe not even the whole of it here. It's unclear, actually probably the whole of it here. But this general structure up here, literally this length flow and this length, opposite to one another on a smaller radius globe, so to a point where they actually can fold in, like that goes in there and that goes in there, and attached though. And what that then does is it suggests maybe if those are attached, then we can follow that trail and say, what if the next length, so I measured like the length of this side, and then I said, how far is it across, like using this thing as a sort of center where it's got this structure here, using this as like a center, how far over does this go to here? Is about here. So it's kind of looks like it's missing like this part of the island, but I think that's like okay. A lot of the other ones seem to fit though. So that from there over to here, to this corner, is similar to this one over here, which I then drew like this. Which was, I measured, assuming that this region wasn't so like punctured inward, so like a straight line this way. Interestingly, that length is essentially the same as this length from this corner to there, along a path that goes up to that corner, which maybe has some similar like this kind of thing relationship. So like if this was folded in, but the next one, so maybe only like folded it in, but the next one and then is gonna be folded in, and then again. And then what I interpret is it stops here at the region of the Mariana Trench where the Japan was once connected to where I believe Philippines is, like, according to this. I draw or place the Philippines here, and yet I'm putting Japan in the same location. So what I'm saying is way back, like at least 252 million years kind of time frame, if not 541. There was a time when those were seemingly. I haven't really like looked into the technical papers to see if it's in any way compatible, but seemingly Japan was attached to the Rencha, and then when it was like not Japan though, it was more like continental, just a continuous mass of land mass, where then current flow started to divide the two into the continuous mass into two land masses and cut them apart enough where it moved away, but as where Asia and North America separated, but then essentially between them is this channel for all this stuff to happen. So like North America starts forming rather than just Laurentia, like the whole western North America accretionary phase starts happening as these two separate, at least in part. There's also which from what I can gather, there's separation potentially evidenced by, like, if we fold this location in over here, then this path, and imagine a current going this way to, or I might need to, where it essentially, like, even though it's going this way, it folds in, it's going like, now it's going more this way. So if there's current flowing along that boundary that then flows along this boundary, there's accretionary terrains that formed in this region in like the right time frame, and in Japan also. So that kind of fits, but I still think that they bonded with Australia. So there's all these details to go through that it's gonna be hard to really like fully describe them. We can go to this one real quick. Current flows relating to Gackle Ridge of water flows that I've interpreted by other locations, but just take my word for it. That water is flowing around the region of below the Himalayas and going around and going up this way and interacting, as well as water flowing along this way that we were just talking about, or current flows that include water flowing this way that then go this way. So there's flow going up this way, flow going in this way, and a flow going down this way, kind of merging, which then leads to this flow from the top to fan out. But then it flows around into this current that pushes it aside as well as vents it that way. And then it goes over into this current that pushes it upward, which is then running in opposition to the current coming down, so they interact. So anywhere there's like currents colliding head on, a lot of times there's a mountain range there type of thing going on. And then this current low continues because it's high enough. Like the depth of the water is not limited to just the surface of the Earth. It's significantly higher than the terrain itself, where this is just under the pressures and high intensity currents that is moving the structures to apply pressure on one another and actually shape the terrain. And then it goes up here, runs into that. So ultimately what matters from this is there's a main like channel that goes down to a nucleus region of this like ammonite like structure again, which is just repetitively happens where this goes over and back around and just cycles and has these rib type things like an ammonite, and like this type of feature over here like an ammonite, this kind of thing like an ammonite. So there's a current though that goes into its nucleus region and goes around the like siding out fanning pressures and goes around and goes across and goes this way, generally speaking, from this structure. So that's worth noting. I just thought I'd mention it because we saw it right now because it's relevant to what we're going to talk about. Let's just go into this. I'm not completely sure what to make of it right now, but there's those possible like sphere movements. So let's just say hypothetically part of the process includes the sphere literally running into the Philippines here and participating in moving the Pacific Open by running into the Philippines here, but doing so in reality in this location, where then it runs into the Philippines and bends off of the pressure. And goes down and over in ways that relate to this and all of the Mariana Trench things. That's kind of the idea, so that's what this is. I was looking more at earlier processes. This is dates to 47 million radiometric dating, or something thereabouts. Yeah, 48. So 48 million is when the Apolaki crater formed. And the reason I want to link it so much to Hawaii, what age of Hawaiian bend in the seamount chain? This one says 50. Let's go to Scholar even. Let's see what Hawaiian seamount bend age. Something. This one's putting it to different ages. It just kind of makes sense also, but in terms of actually making the Pacific data all come together and coalesce in a nice and peaceful and friendly way, where the like actual sides of the analysis can merge and like make sense. It's a little tricky. It seems almost like it slid away. So what I tried to do, maybe one more detail before I get into, also this again. There's the mantle puncture hole location over there and some other interesting related details to this. But Where is it? Must be like a newest post. There it is. This. So I was thinking, which we'll again kind of look into some like map parallels. I was thinking that this sphere went over from this way, but mind you, the Earth was smaller radius, so when it went this way, it was really ended up going in a straight line, though. It went this way, over here, and then it impacted is what I'm kind of thinking. So that's what this is the sphere underneath the cross, mind you, and the details of how it got there, we'll get into more in depth. It didn't just go this way. I think it also went physically under North America in substantial amounts, and then kind of made its way to here. But when it collided here, it just kind of started to shape the land. I don't interpret this collision of this sphere. Mind you, it's under the crust, so it's kind of incubated. It's not like it's just like physically exposed at the crust yet. So it's kind of hiding underneath the surface, and then it flows up the underneath the Pacific region of North America, Pacific Northwest. Underneath this region, I'm taking a path, though, where it ultimately ends up going through this region, but when it's up here. So this green path over here is over here. This green path is up on the opposite side. And there's a current flow that's coming from generally over here, but going in this way. So what I'm thinking is happening is this sphere is getting very close to the north terminal, the north pole of the Earth, and it moves to the North Pole. Like, it literally goes through here in the current, I guess, where then it kind of interacts in a way that it leads to some other outcomes. Like, subtler systems were more able to be in the current than a huge spherical decay product of Australia, it seems. I don't know. But it went through here, underneath the crust, though, here. To then go across the crust to over here, which was over here, where it runs into other pressures from the opposing side right here, and starts to form like a divide by this other pressure pushing into the system, so it forms like a barrier between them. But then it moves it over here, and when it moves it here, the boundary of Alaska is starting to open away from Russia. This opening, this crack. So imagine a sphere goes in this way and makes it over here. This region isn't necessarily like cut yet. So it's possible the current flow itself, like the large scale current flows, were going up this way generally and running into this current in a way where they are even not running into the current, like adjacent to it, but very much opposite directions and peacefully though, or something. I don't know. Not peacefully. Very peacefully. Oh, there were birds chirping. Okay. But sphere comes through, runs over there, moves over that way. But when it gets here, essentially this is open, so it's right. It ends up being in this nook here. Out exposed though, finally. So it gets exposed in this location, and then the segments of the continents start to swing away as this whole process happens and open. But in that case, then Hawaii is just transported from up here in this crevice. It moves down over here. Let's see. Like if that boundary. Not necessarily going to be exact, but I just was curious. But it moves into this location. But what's going on in this location is that current, mind you, the current is flowing into it this way, and then it's hitting resistance. So the current's like, well, gotta go around that resistance. So it starts going this way. But it's really, or even maybe move that resistance out of the way so it starts moving it kind of thing. Where it goes back over here. But it's, mind you, these didn't happen simultaneously. These are probably like related, but not in a like datable way where they actually time to one another. So my interpretation is that even though the current is not etching this fracture line, there's a mid-ocean ridge in the crust of the earth at the time, a current is still flowing there that is then leading to this flow path where that current is physically participating in moving the sphere of Hawaii over this way. And then as it goes down here, it starts interacting with the nearby terrain and physically directing it along like a focal point that's bending into it. Where it gets down here, and then it's in this path, where this path goes here, over here, and then over this way that we were just looking at here, maybe? No. Wherever it was. With the ammonite structure. So there's a flow going this way, bending, so maybe even relating to why there's another flow going in opposition over this way, off of the bend. It makes a 90-degree-ish bend. And then the divide, or maybe 120, over here is another current that goes to Damodar Kund, makes shallograms. So the stuff going on up here, like this basin opened at the right time. It's like 120, 140, I don't know, something longer than like at a good time. So it seems like Hawaii, the sphere of Hawaii, moved up to this nook at literally the North Pole, mind you. Like this structure is at the at this structure, a terminal. So here's the Lemonov Ridge, this structure. around it. Also, I forget what it's called. Chukchi Plateau here. I've interpreted as being where the sphere went through and in some way interacted to either create this or is already being created and give it a channel for the sphere to go through in part. Some kind of like chakra terminal structure that the sphere went through and just like tore apart the support structure underneath, so it kind of collapsed in over there when it was actually more continuous at one time. It's kind of what I was thinking. Then getting over there, going over there, going over there, going here where it interacts with this water current that forms like it pushes material of the sphere over here to form this ridge, I guess. But then it gets the sphere focused through here, where it's more able to move out, maybe, because like currents are flowing into it in opposition too. Makes a wall, gets through, where then at like 80 million, it starts to form this. At 47 million-ish, as I've seen it in places. The bends, and then it goes over here. Mind you, there are these things going on. Where the first bend, or going back, I guess the first bend. So it comes down this way, and then it bends, and then bends again. But this bend, where it bends again, is at the same general location as the end of the Mid-Pacific Mountains, and where Hess Rise kind of like goes up this way to go around the Papanin Ridge to Shatsky Rise. And this boundary of the base of Shatsky and Hess Rise is where the bend is. And then where this bend is, the second bend, is where this line is. So it's very curious relationships. Also, this line generally points at the front, the nose of Mid-Pacific Mountains. So there's also those types of relationships going on with what, like the maths or whatever, just what's going on. So then another piece of the puzzle is the Mid-Pacific Mountains. I've been describing as having formed here underneath North America when it was Laurentia, largely. It was forming here along this boundary while the Pacific Plate was forming underneath North America and Australia, like this. Here's North America, here's Central America, and now here's the Western Pacific with the Mid-Pacific Mountains, where it had like a Western Pacific boundary over here that then fans out. Here's the focal point where all the energy is coming from, which was over here, then went up this way. So this jet stream went up this way and went up over into the resistance over there, where then it ran into the North Terminal. And then Australia was rotating here pretty much. It was physically just rotating, but its physical rotation was induced by these current flows. And as it rotated, it connected in certain ways. So here again, I tried to do this. So these are taken from Google Earth with the same magnification and just aligned relative to one another. Maybe a little, this one's a little, starts a little higher. So this one ends a little lower. So it's basically to there. Mind you, I measured that, so that one's like just should be in terms of matching distance. But then from this one, that same location there, and then again this same corner from that corner, just matching. Like, I didn't per se measure, but these are the same magnification. I think I did measure this too, but I didn't measure to those points. It just looked clean enough. And then from that same point there, down this way and down to pretty much the Pacific Northwest of like Washington compared to Japan. So I just kept going down the coastline. These are just North America and Asia reconnecting like a zipper down the coastline. But then we run into where then I interpret Papua New Guinea. So this is using the North American side analysis as the continuation. So like the boundary of North America continues down this way, but the boundary of Asia also continues. It's just not connected to North America anymore. So then we apply the next connection along this boundary of North America, which is actually from Papua New Guinea down to across from this structure where the focal point in the magnetic anomaly is, down to this boundary, this structure up to Papua New Guinea, this region that at one time was linear, like more like this and not like this, where Solomon Islands was more in this region or closed in. There might have been something to do with New Zealand. I'm not sure where it like originated exactly. Something tells me it might be more in the upper portion of Australia. But this was generally connected to here. Same distance. And then past Baja. I don't know if I started this one with like the gap unaccounted for, where this one is, I think. Oh, that one's actually there. So it's somewhat similar. I guess I didn't align these either. But I think this one starts more there to go to there. So that looks about right too. Then I started to say, well, maybe Papua New Guinea was like over here, because what I was doing was really, I was trying to get Borneo attached to Australia, and in order to do that, I basically, in the way that I believe that it was like laid out, is that Borneo had Philippines like this chunk here is actually related to this chunk where the northern portion of the Philippines was physically inside this stretch of the Philippines. And Borneo was all the way over here, so that Australia was effectively over here relative to Borneo, with the Philippines adjacent. But then to do that, I'm kind of like, I got Papua New Guinea boundary here to account for, but then I got Sulawesi. So I was thinking maybe Sulawesi went here and Papua New Guinea went here and it's okay. Like actually it was more bounded there, but Philippines seem like they would have to extend pretty far, so maybe there's something awry in this analysis at that, like these details. Like I put these together, did the same thing, back to the same point. Where Japan is across from that. And then this boundary is across from here. And then what I went around as well, and even to South America. And then what I did was I tried to rotate it. And I said, what if we open this here? This like bond breaks open, and then essentially a shift. So then I started to think of it kind of like a belt, I guess, like a structure that's continuous that bonds to itself but can be taken apart and then like shifted around a bend. So then it has like an actual shifting mechanism where it pulls and stretches the earth, where it like adjusts. And as this happens, Australia is rotating this way, like pulling away from Asia, pulling away from Borneo, but still attached to Antarctica, still attached to South America, although like segmenting somewhat. Certainly some separation happening in places. Like, I don't know when separation happened, where exactly in full detail, so I might not, like, I know a lot of separation happened here late, but that doesn't mean there's not some early that I'm not sure about. But so it rotates and it opens this space. I was thinking literally like before this space is closed, there's no channel. It's just like zipped closed. But then the rotation of Australia by these currents, like it's etching around its boundary, it's getting around it enough where it freely can move, and it physically rotates on that ammonite structure that's current flows that are making it rotate. So it rotates, and when it does that, it breaks away from Borneo, but it also reattaches to North America at a different location, as well as probably participating in opening the Caribbean Sea. When it rotates to reattach there, which then brings that focal point to be in Ecuador. But then currents going up this way and then back down this way. So I was thinking, like, effectively, maybe the Philippines gets kind of caught in the space over here because it attaches to North America, but it also is like there's not that much space yet over here. So it's kind of like just forming a bond across both of them because of the narrowness of it all, but there's still a channel for current to go up this way. It just can go back down this way and run into this point. So, like, a sphere maybe goes back down this way, runs into it, and then like this space generally opens, like shifts. So even if it formed at an earlier time, I don't like, I know that things are relatively older in the Western Pacific. Let's just see if there's any nuance in that top left that is on the maps. So it's pretty old. I know the center is misdiagnosed. It's significantly younger than anticipated, where they kind of just extrapolated based on samples in other parts of the ocean based on magnetic anomaly maps. They just said, therefore, this one is that age, but it wasn't so in this area. There's definitely data that does not align with what's actually drawn here, so it's quite possible there's other data. It does look like 100 million around up where this region. But if it's like going down out of this, runs into here, and then the whole the whole layer is able, by the pressure pushing over here, to like shift off and expose portions of the process that were happening underneath it, that were like dated to a different time pretty much, then maybe we wouldn't realize that, I guess. So I guess what I'm saying is it looks kind of like it could hit here, push out the side, and travel down to rejoin Borneo, but with like its back against it, like, boom, getting caught by Borneo, lodged in that position, while Australia is moved away as well. And then the Pacific just like blows wide open from this point. Wow, Hawaii maybe bounces off of this and goes over. There's got to be a relationship between the bend and the Shatsky and Hess rise, which I have attributed to having formed Hess rise over here along Bighorn Mountain the resistance of Bighorn Mountain with all its rings and incredible details over here. In the magnetic anomaly map, there was a structure forming here relating to currents flowing down here that have pressures over here. So there's just a mass kind of similar to these kinds of things, but just like a structure forming over here underneath this layer that then slid out from under it as Hess rise, imprinting this circle structure here. And then Shatsky rise was over here, forming behind the mid-Pacific Mountains, which I've kind of interpreted maybe the sphere. So there's so many details. The sphere kind of emerged from Ontong Java, Manihiki, and Hikurangi breaking apart from a source that is here still. Is where it happened, but it, like, the focal point of energy moved here while Hawaii moved elsewhere, or at least the imprint moved here. But it did so with, like, for a reason. It wasn't just imprinted and then stopped, like the process was still going, and there's currents flowing out this way, and it brings Hawaii with it. And I was thinking maybe it brought Hawaii with it a lot more than I realized, where it went up through this way. So if we go back here, I've turned this a little bit. Or this one, I believe this one. The way this is. Oh no. Okay. Okay. Like, it was, I believe, generally more like this in this nook of the Gulf. And I see reason to interpret this nook in the Gulf has a close relationship to this magnetic anomaly strip here. Like, almost like it was part of the process of the breaking of bonds over in this area. But where the initial position had it more up in the Gulf. So I was thinking maybe the sphere went through that region to go all the way over to this far side, and then started rolling from this side, like a long resistance here, depositing, like creating a debris field of stuff. But then there's a Shatsky rise similar to this. It just continues over here. Shatsky rise was there, and the mid-Pacific Mountains were being formed by the sphere rolling through. Or I'm not sure if it's by the sphere rolling through or just the process as a whole. It would be cool if it was a sphere, but it kind of seems like, for reasons, like, I suspect it ran into this region. So it got ejected. Like, it went this way and then bent up this way. Up there, but really, like, out of here. Which this structure was generally over here, like in this segment, that launched this sphere out of here initially when it was all the way over here, like where it goes up this way into this resistance of the mid-Pacific Mountains specifically without stopping there. I don't know. But then the reason it hits here more so probably is because it actually breaks through Shatsky Rise. So like there's some weird little like circular indentations over here too. So I got the impression maybe it physically Shatsky Rise and mid-Pacific Mountains were forming very adjacent as a backstop to this material pretty much, so that this could form like it did over underneath this region, as I interpret it, where this was like a backstop, and there's no backstop anymore because it got blown away by this sphere cutting through it that hit it like boom, and then it kind of went over this way. And then went along one of these trails relative to the path over this way to then reach a point here, which if we go over here, or let's see, here, it's hard to say. I was thinking those structures are underneath North America, Shatsky Rise and Hess Rise. That's my interpretation. There's a Shatsky conjugate proposed to be still over here, so there's definitely reasons in scientific literature. I'm not just pulling shit out of my ass. I mean, point is, Hess Rise, I interpret to have formed over here, and they shift out. And I think how they shift out is as the sphere rolls up this way, it goes underneath at least the western side of the path, runs into Shatsky Rise underneath the crust, dislodges it, and the Pacific Ocean plate begins to like move away in a way where it was kind of connected by those, but then it allowed for some motion, but that didn't really start the process until it started to actually cut. Once it reached past Hess Rise, right at the end of where it was accumulating material, it then started to cut in a way where it like rotated this out. I don't know if that makes sense. Still trying to figure out what exactly is going on here. It seems related to over here, is basically what I'm getting at. Like it goes up past Hess Rise and then it continues up this way and like cuts apart the terrains in a way that it allows for space to open, but then it keeps going where then it runs into the opening in Alaska, like in this area maybe. it's shifted. But really, it went from here and then came out this way, hit there, came over there, got pushed in the currents to come over this way, where then it was caught in that, by the way, open this way, roll down. All the while somehow crossing the bands of Shatsky-Hess-Rise wave patterns. It's almost like a pendulum. Like, same location gets equal opposite energy. Like the location where the sphere goes into up here. Which, by the way, the North Pole is like right there, I believe. Let's see. Yeah, like right there. So it literally goes to the North Pole. It also seemingly goes through Chogash Plateau. Chukchi, Chogash. Thinking of like India or something. Chukchi Plateau goes through it, hits resistance, or even participates in making the North Terminal. Or even the sphere doesn't truly exist in the most material and distinct way, and more as like a photon in transit. Like a particle wave duality thing that's more like manifest in a observable way, where like a particle travels through as a current and then becomes a particle at some point, where it like cools down, I guess. There's certainly relationships I was coming across with my research and the Arctic in general. Unfortunately, I don't really remember. This video is getting pretty long. I don't know if I did a very good job presenting all of the incredible thoughts I've had recently, though. That's what makes me a little disappointed. To stop if I... It's just late. I just don't know if I went through that many new details and made this more maybe recappy than I would like it to have been. I could just kind of look at my paper. Look down at this. I got Gackle Ridge Caldera, Apalaki Caldera, largest caldera on Earth. We already talked about that though. Okay, oh yeah, this was something I found interesting. If a sphere rolls along this path of the Emperor's seamount chain and deposits the volume of mass of the volume of material that is the Emperor Hawaiian seamount chain, then it would, which is 1 million kilometers cubed. If a sphere were to have a 1 million kilometers cubed in volume, it would require a radius of 59 miles. But because this is the inner surface, meaning there's a volume surrounding an inner surface that is almost like a void, I would say is perhaps captured water in the process that was able to like get caught in some kind of hot magmatic chamber that cooled around it but stably formed like a nucleus that seeded this like planet ball of water thing that had like a crust that then behaved like a sphere that rolled and then grew and like functioned like a particle in physics and chemistry and so on. So anyway, the point is, it would if we add for the interior space of the surface area of the Hawaiian Islands is what I did, which is pretty much the inner surface, is another 447,000 kilometers cubed, so about 1.5 million kilometers cubed gives us an outer radius of 87.2 miles. The Apalaki caldera is 93 miles. I thought that was interesting. Then it has an inner caldera structure that I believe was like 40 miles, where this inner sphere would seemingly have a 59-mile radius. The bend marks a shift in movement of Pacific Plate some 47 million years from northward to a more northwesterly direction. Almost makes me wonder if it's like behaving like a gear to the layer of the crust that is the oceanic crust, and physically like if it's rolling south and grabbing the fabric underneath it and pulling it like along like a conveyor belt structure to then cause a north motion to the plate as it moves southward, and then when it bends and goes southeastward to then conveyor belt this plate by pulling on the material as it rolls to physically like behave like a what is a freaking word? Little balls. Little metal balls. Something to help allow for motions. Okay. Then I looked into the Cretaceous normal superchron, a prolonged absence of polarity reversals, which I've looked into before, but I thought I'd kind of look at it with this stuff in mind. So that was from 121 to 84 million years, which maybe was when the sphere was moving from the first position of just getting to the pole. Like the sphere reached here at say 121 million radiometric dating, and then by the time it reaches over here, it's 84 million radiometric dating, and the Cretaceous normal superchron comes to an end as the Hawaiian Emperor Seamount chain begins to form as the sphere rolls. So that seems kind of at least tied to at least possibly point to more particulars with the 121 to 84 million range. Kind of limits it to the end of its motion, so it probably is like a second half kind of thing. And the sphere seems to have literally gone to the north terminal and reached it, and then presumably tapped into it some energetic way, like a battery tapping in kind of thing, that then excited it even and sent it on over this way by a slingshot mechanism as the Earth grew to a new radius. The 10 million years prior was reverse polarity occurring 4 times every million years. So leading up to this 121 million, in the 10 million years prior, there was regular reversal of the poles. So it's almost like it's kind of like moving, falling back, and moving, falling back, and like different rungs of a ladder, moving, falling back, but like making it up there in that time frame maybe. And then once it gets up there, lodging in place, although I don't know if that encompasses a sufficient time window for its motion, so to only be 10 million. I haven't looked into the crons of the magnetic anomalies that much, especially not to be able to really, without looking at them in the moment, have much thought on it. While the Cretaceous normal superchron is at the North Pole, so not reflected by polar pressures. Oh yeah, while the sphere is at the North Pole, so not reflected by polar pressures, is what I wrote. So I was thinking maybe it's up there. So there was very little interaction of the system of the sphere with the rest of the currents. Like it was very one-sided because it was at the pole, but then it started to move from the pole, essentially. Just a thought. Jurassic Quiet Zone 157 million, early sphere formation time. So that's what I was kind of thinking. So maybe the sphere formed around the Jurassic Quiet Zone, which is 157 million, which is another period of quiet. So I think that's related to polarity reversals, a lack thereof. Then another superchron is the Kaiman reversal, which was 318 to 265 million, which was approaching but not reaching the Permian-Triassic boundary. So if we go back to this other one, Cretaceous normal superchron, 121 to 84. So that was approaching but not reaching the KT boundary, which is when the Earth rapidly expanded. Whereas the PT boundary looks to be when the Earth expanded also in the time frame of the Tethys Ocean being formed. And it did like a first stage of expansion, which is another detail that it needs accounted for. That like when I was saying like this doesn't quite match up exactly, like it's possible that part of the details are like, well, it was always attached over here and it didn't really turn to be like this maybe, and instead like this just moved away, but this like gross actual landmass in that region, because there's blocks of like Tethys stuff in this area. There's a lot of Tethys stuff in this area that I don't know without really close inspection what is formed between 541 million radiometric dating and the Holocene. Like, certainly there's Archean chunks of Craton and other things, but there's also like Tethys blocks that are like, is this underlain by any basement rock? Did this form in the Earth expansion process? I don't know. It's hard to say at a glance. But yeah, so it appears that it's possible there was another similar event in the time frame of the reversal leading into the Permian Triassic boundary, where maybe it did something similar, where like it was more like Australia and it emitted a particle to Australia and changed the poles or something. Something of that nature that was similar but reverse, leading to a reverse supercon. I don't know why. What it, if it was just a rotation of Australia leading to something that's a reversal. I don't know. Seems purely related to the Tethys formation, though. Okay, without getting into too many random details. Reconstructed dipole strength values during the Cretaceous normal supercron are up to 3 times higher than average Cenozoic in single crystal studies, whereas they're indistinguishable from average of the Cenozoic on whole rock samples. So there's this kind of like mix match, like not compatible, like detail of reality. So it must be pointing to something. But what I found most interesting was this detection of a dipole strength value up to 3 times higher, even if it's in the single crystals. Maybe it's like more of a subtle detection that's in like fractal ways. We can see things that are more subtle by using single crystals than the whole rock, that maybe require more like gross effects that are more large scale, and even more so, even though it's all like major things, but like detectable in the single crystals. I don't know. Where it's like imprint that something did happen, where there's a strong dipole strength value increase up to 3 times higher during that period. So if this sphere is at the pole, I mean, it seems like it would be interacting in a way that maybe would lead to that, and maybe even would lead to like a subtler amplification, but where like the Earth itself is maybe more affecting the whole rock samples. So it's not as detectable in the whole rock samples. I don't know. Ooh. So a bunch of this is like ideas I already went through, stuff I already went through. Definitely wrote some the Eurasian Basin is Cenozoic. Over here, Eurasian Basin is Cenozoic, so 58 million is what they said. And then the Amerasian Basin is Mesozoic, 252 to 66 million. So basically, this one happened during the, I guess, during the Permian, like subsequent to Permian Triassic extinction event, when the Earth expanded, like the more major Tethys phase. It created like a pole type structure there that was uh, that region. I don't know if it was related to the Permian Triassic, although certainly related to Hawaii's presence, so I don't know. I don't know exactly what 252 to 66 is a big range. There's probably more specific numbers that would help shed light. It was suggested that the Lomonosov, or whatever, this ridge here is very much like the Baja California. So they were suggesting Baja California will look very much like this ridge. I don't know what to make of it. In 58 million years, this ridge will look more like that. Or vice versa. Baja California will look more like the ridge. That's what they were suggesting. But just the tie to Baja California I found interesting. Maybe there's some relationship. I didn't know what to make of it. But I did notice this. Like, what is the relationship between the Mariana Trench and that ridge / that ridge? Like, there's clearly a relationship by the linear features that even are here. It's across there, connecting through. There's a relationship for sure. And then the Mariana Trench seems to be related to when the Philippines were hit, let's say, and disconnecting and leaving behind a structure. Oh, intense wave that was part of the process of the Philippines being hit. I don't know if that even fits. I know Mariana Trench is dated to like 180 million. So if that's really the case, I don't know, because I've seen things to suggest otherwise. I'm not completely sure what the dating on the Mariana Trench is to tie it in, but it's certainly related to the separation process between these islands and Australia. And over here, so for some reason they were connected, seemingly through the Philippines, if this is possibly true, to actually be connected there. Leading to a current down it, where then it runs into resistance at that point and deflects outward in the arc. Like if we go like this from, let's say here, and just go over here to like here. It's pretty close to this arc. Let's see. I'll move this to this boundary. Is very close to that arc. little hidden smiley face there, seemingly related to that. It really does seem like the motions of the sphere of Hawaii by the currents involved are pushing into Philippines somehow as a something is pushing into, and then separating from them over here, where then it gets launched over here to go this way. $19, $20 north, $20 north. Just kind of curious, is this like $20 north? No. Where's $20 north over here? Maybe it was doing it on top of the old ocean crust, like new layers forming on top of it. But then it just kind of opened, revealing the underlayers, sliding away some of the overlaying materials that were on both sides. In a sense, in some ways, so this could be connected to that, but then like be moved over while all forming after this had formed in general. Almost like opening, where it like opens, but then it does it again and again and again, and all these layers kind of fan out next to each other and like overlaying, but generally fanning out enough. I don't know. Okay, I definitely gotta go now. Hopefully this was a good episode. I was really like trying to make it something to like wow people into giving a damn. But I don't know if I did a justice to the thoughts I've been having of why this really seems to have credence. I mean, if you've seen my other episodes, it might be better than otherwise. I was really trying to make it in this video alone, at least be curious. So, alright, see you guys later. Thanks for watching and hanging out. Peace out. Like, comment, subscribe.